Hey guys, what's going on? Just want to make a quick video and talk about two things that I think will help learning bug bounty hunters and people that maybe feel stuck or aren't sure which way to go, maybe aren't finding things, or maybe want to get a little bit better at finding certain things, whatever it may be. Just the next step in your journey, other than maybe I'll go back to Portsmouth and do labs or do CTFs or whatever. Just something to keep in mind. It's a step that a lot of people sometimes miss, so I want to talk about it today. And I think people kind of hit on it, but don't really talk about like the really why behind it. Because I see a lot of people on Twitter and Reddit and stuff like that that are like, oh, if you're interested in web app testing, go build a web app, go deploy a PHP web app, or, whatever it may be, React, whatever it is, like go learn these web technologies by using them, and that will help you hack them. And like, that's very true, obviously, but there's kind of a reason for that. Similar things is like every once in a while you come across a bug bounty hunter on Twitter or something like that that only hunts one type of bug and is very good at it, whether it's like authorization and IDOR bugs, or it's someone who just pops a whole bunch of SQL injections even nowadays. And people wonder, like, I can't find any SQL injections. Like, how are you finding these all over the place? Are they looking in separate places than I do? Like, do they have this special payload? What is it? People that still find a lot of cross-site scripting, stuff like that. And I think there's kind of two reasons for it, and I'm just going to mention each one kind of briefly. So the two kind of paths I'm talking about, one I would call intuition or pattern recognition, and the other one I would call like just straight up expertise, right? So the pattern recognition and intuition side. Intuition, right, is just like having that feeling or just kind of knowing. Pattern recognition, same thing, like kind of seeing a pattern. A good example is like the studies that are done for like grandmaster chess players, right? Like grandmaster chess players can remember a bunch more of pieces on the board if you just put them there and then take them off than a beginner chess player, because they start recognizing it in chunks and in patterns. They don't remember it piece by piece, because there's only so many boards in chess. But when you mix up the board to something random that would never happen in a game, then all of a sudden their memory goes away because they're looking for the patterns more than like very specific pieces in their head. And it's similar thing in bug bounty. There's a lot of people that as you continue to get better at bug bounties, start paying attention to what certain patterns are, what parameters might be vulnerable, what behavior seems weird, what endpoints seem weird, what functionality is normally bad. I think it was, if you go back and watch like Jason Haddock's talk, his most recent bug bounty methodology, he goes over like some endpoints and how to test them and stuff like that. And there's a few that he's like, oh yeah, I test these all the time because they're always vulnerable. So if he ever finds one, he just tests it right away. Like that kind of stuff is stuff to pay attention to because he has that pattern recognition or the intuition from his time bug bounty hunting and having a lot of success with it, that anytime he sees that pattern or that thing, he instantly is, boom, he's zeroed in on it. That's kind of how you become more efficient, how you maybe have more success, is start to pay attention even as you do CTFs in practice and labs, like what kind of behavior has to be there for an SQLI to be there? What kind of behavior has to be there for other bugs or authorization bugs? That kind of, like, what kind of patterns are you looking for? Oh, like there's user IDs being thrown around. Okay, well then this is probably a really good target to start looking for IDORs. Whereas if you don't see any user IDs and there's not different user levels and, role-based authentication, stuff like that, like then maybe it's not a good pattern. So that's kind of the pattern recognition, intuition stuff, and that only comes again from just practice, but almost like reflecting on your hacking or reflecting on your practice, whether you're practicing, you're actually hunting out in the wild, reflect on it and think like, okay, what kind of stuff am I coming across? What could this mean? Functionality, like as Z Shano and a couple other hunters talk about it, like really learning the app, learning what it does, what it wants to do, how it could break. Like all that stuff, you start to gather the intuition, the thing like, ooh, like what if I did this a little bit different? And then when it does something weird, you're like, oh, like this could be a thing. Like you kind of develop, again, the intuition. The other half of it is the expertise side. So when I mentioned someone who just, even nowadays in 2023, is just popping crazy SQL injections all the time, and like no one else is. How is that? Like how are they finding magically all the right targets for SQL injection? Well, they're probably not just lucky, but then you go and look into some of these people's backgrounds and it's like, oh, he was a DB admin and was doing SQL database administration for 15 years and then swapped over to bug hunting. So of course he knows exactly how everyone is building their databases in the back end, exactly how everyone is trying to pull data out of the back end and stuff like that, because he has the expertise around databases. And that's, again, when I mentioned that, like, people tell you to go build web apps and go play with stuff. The reason why that normally works is because you're building that expertise. You can build the expertise by just trying to hack it right away, but you'll probably do it better by actually building it or using it fully. And then you start to realize, like, oh, like, so this is how this works, and this is how someone would actually build it on the back end. So when you flop out and you're on the outside, you might be able to find kinks in the armor because you've built it before, and you know, like, oh, if you configure this wrong, like, this should be here, this might happen, or yada yada yada, and it would bring you to that. But you only know that if you have the expertise. Otherwise, you're just shooting blind on every web application. So if you're doing your bug bounty hunting, there's a target that has just a bunch of, like, Laravel, right? And you don't know anything about it. Well, go try and build one first. Take a day or two, break from the bug bounty hunting, and build a whole application by yourself, a little play application, play around with it, learn the ins and outs, the configurations, the documentation, all that stuff, and then go back to the target you're hacking on with a new expertise and work on it. And again, as you build stuff, as you, like, especially if you have a programming background, as you code, all this kind of stuff, build the stuff just as much as you break the stuff. Read the documentation, read the, all of it. Read as much as you can on stuff, how it works, how it breaks. If you go read a book on being an SQL administrator, there's going to be a section on avoiding SQL injection and how you should do it and what it looks like and what flags you want to be careful for and how you want stuff to work. Maybe just go read that section. Go get a bunch of SQL books online and just read the section about the security, how to do it securely, how you can mess it up, and just narrow it in on that way. But that pattern recognition and the expertise are two things beyond just, practice a lot and do CTFs and Portswigger Academy. Once you kind of have that baseline, you're like, okay, but I'm still not really, maybe you found one or two things, but you're like, I'm really not, like, totally getting there. Or let's say you come from a very pen test background and you're trying to kind of struggling to put it into bug bounty speak. Like, this is probably one of those gaps for you, is find either something that you can really go down the rabbit hole in and become an expert in, or, like, really work on one type of vulnerability and get the pattern recognition down and kind of get an intuition for when it might be there and when it might not. So you can comb through targets really quickly and be like, ooh, this is one I should hunt on for this. Or, like, no, like, this doesn't have any of this stuff I'm really looking for. So just something to think about. Wanted to make a quick video, throw it out there. Let me know in the comments or on Twitter if, like, there's certain things that you're an expert in or that you want to be an expert in, or something that you think I may have missed in one of these two topics of either pattern recognition or expertise. I'd love to hear about it. But anyway, keep this one nice and short. See you guys later. Peace.